Elias Marrow stood near the water's edge, his gaze fixed on the rippling surface where the moon's reflection danced and shimmered with a strange, unnatural light. The usual peaceful lapping of the lake was now underscored by a subtle, rhythmic pulse, like a heartbeat beneath the water that set his nerves on edge. He was not alone. Mara Lorne approached quietly, her footsteps muffled against the damp earth, her tall frame silhouetted against the fading light. Her dark hair was pulled back tightly, revealing sharp features etched with worry. Elias turned to her, sensing the weight of what she carried within. "Elias," Mara began, her voice low but urgent. "I saw him again today, Jonas." Elias's breath caught. Where? In the lake's reflection. Not just a reflection, something else. A place beyond the surface. I reached out, and he reached back. But he's trapped. He's stuck there, caught between worlds. The words settled over Elias like a cold wave. He had heard whispers of such liminal spaces before, but hearing it from Mara, the village herbalist, the keeper of law, made it painfully real. "You're sure?" she nodded, eyes glistening. "He's not gone, not entirely. But the longer he stays, the harder it becomes to bring him back. The moonit's pulling him in, pulling us all in." Elias clenched his fists, the old ache of loss gnawing at him. The lake had always been a place of solace. Now it was a prison, a trap shaped by the moon's eerie descent. Across the village, the symptoms of lunar madness were spreading. Villagers, once vibrant and steady, now stumbled through their days like sleepwalkers, eyes clouded with a haunted glaze. Some muttered of voices beneath the water, commands whispered in a tongue that twisted their minds. Others saw things, distorted faces in the shadows, hands reaching up from the depths. Panic simmered beneath the surface, threatening to boil over. In the tavern, an older woman suddenly convulsed, her body writhing on the floor as she babbled incoherently about the moon's embrace. Elias and Mara rushed to her side, but her eyes remained fixed on the window, where the moon hung impossibly low, its light bleeding across the lake. "It's coming," she whispered. "It's coming for us all." Sheriff Caltain, ever the pragmatist, was less willing to entertain such fears. He met Ilias's growing concern with gruff dismissal. "People are scared," he said, pacing in his cramped office. "That's all this is. Fear makes folks see things." "This isn't just fear," Elias insisted. "Something's wrong. The moon, the lake, it's changing people." Calton's eyes narrowed. "You're chasing ghosts, Marrow. It's dangerous, stirring up panic." But even the sheriff couldn't ignore the reports piling up. Missing villagers, strange sightings, and the pervasive aura of dread that settled over Glimmer Hollow like a shroud. That night, Elias found himself drawn once again to the lake. The moon's reflection swayed hypnotically, casting ripples of light that seemed almost alive. A sudden shiver ran down his spine as a shadow flickered across the surface, a shape, shifting and fluid, like a face contorted by pain and madness. He blinked, but the vision remained, haunting his gaze. Behind him, Mara's voice was barely a whisper. "It's watching us, waiting." Elias swallowed hard. The boundary between reality and nightmare was thinning, and the villager's fatand, his own, hung precariously in the balance. "We have to find a way to stop it," he said, voice steady despite the fear clawing at him, "before it's too late." A cold wind swept across the water, carrying with it the faintest of whispers, half-remembered songs of the moon and the lake, of souls lost and darkness growing. As the night deepened, so did the madness, and the moon sank ever lower, closer to the water's hungry embrace. The air was thick with the chill of early autumn, a biting cold that seemed to seep into his very bones. The moon hung low, swollen and unnaturally bright, its silver glow casting long, wavering shadows that danced upon the restless surface of the water. Ripples, subtle but unsettling, traced across the lake as if disturbed by some unseen hand beneath. Ilias's breath came in shallow bursts, forming fragile clouds that dissolved quickly into the darkening air. His eyes narrowed, searching the mirrored depths for answers that refused to come. Night after night, the moon sank closer, and with it came a creeping unease that gnawed at the edges of his sanity. The lake's hypnotic shimmer tugged at his mind, whispering secrets he was desperate to deny. He turned away from the water and made his way back to his cabin. The familiar creak of the wooden dock underfoot the only sound to accompany his heavy footsteps. Inside, the dim glow of a single candle flickered against walls cluttered with fishing nets, weathered tools, and worn photographs. Elias moved stiffly, the weight of exhaustion pressing down on him as memories began to rise unbidden. His fingers trembled as they brushed over a faded photograph of his late wife, her smile frozen in time but always just out of reach. The loss that had shattered his world clawed at his heart anew, mingling with the dread that now gripped the village. He had wrestled with grief for years, but tonight it felt sharper, more suffocating, as if the moon's descent had awakened something darker within him. A sudden noise snapped his attention to the window. A distant, mournful cry echoed across the lake. Ilias's heart pounded, the sound reverberating through his chest like a warning. He swallowed hard, steadying his breath, but the unease lingered. The line between past and present blurred. The shadows in his cabin seemed to shift and lengthen, teasing the edges of his vision. The next evening found Elias in the village tavern, a cramped, dimly lit room filled with a low murmur of anxious voices. Mara Lorne sat across from him, her sharp green eyes reflecting both determination and fear. Sheriff Caltaine leaned against the bar, his stocky frame, rigid jaw clenched tight beneath his gruff exterior. The atmosphere was taut, like a wire stretched to its breaking point. "You're chasing ghosts, Elias," the sheriff said, voice low and steady, but edged with frustration. "This is a village, not some cursed fairy tale. People vanish here, that's terrifying, but we need facts, not superstition." Mara's gaze flared. "And what about the shimmering reflections? The way the moon's light pulls at the lake like a living thing? You saw what happened to Jonas. We can't just pretend." Ilias's voice cracked as he spoke, haunted by the gulf of loss that separated him from his younger brother. "It's not just superstition. Something's wrong here. The moon is changing us, fracturing our minds." The sheriff's skepticism clashed with Mara's urgency, and Elias felt caught between their worlds. Fear and paranoia rippled through the villagers, dividing them into uneasy factions. Some clung to reason, others to desperate belief. And Elias, caught in the storm of his own unraveling, wondered how much longer he could hold on to the fragile thread of reality. That night, sleep eluded him. When it finally came, it brought no relief. Instead, it dragged him into a labyrinth of nightmares where the moon sank into the lake, swallowing light and hope whole. He found himself drowning beneath the surface, water cold and suffocating. Shadows twisting into faces he could not place, some familiar, some monstrous. The lake whispered promises of oblivion, its depths alive with the echoes of lost souls. He woke with a gasp, heart hammering wildly, sweat chilling on his skin despite the cold night air. For a moment, the line between dream and waking blurred. The candle flickered as if caught in a breeze, though the room was still. Elias pressed his hands to the rough wooden table, grounding himself against the tide of madness rising within. Outside, the moon hung low once more, its glow spilling silver light through the window, casting strange patterns on the floor. Elias knew this was no ordinary night. The lake's call was growing stronger, and with it, the danger threatening to consume Glimmerhollow and himself. He clenched his fists, the determination hardening in his chest. He could not afford to fall apart. Not now, not when the village needed him most. But as the shadows lengthened and the moon sank ever lower, Elias, Marrow felt the fragile walls of his mind beginning to crack, threatening to shatter completely under the weight of lunar madness and aquatic dread. The fractured minds of Glimmerhollow were a warning, a whisper of the darkness to come. Elias would have to confront not only the horrors lurking beneath the lake's surface, but the demons within himself. The night was deepening, and with it, the nightmare was only beginning. As dawn threatened the horizon, Elias stood once more by the lake, the hypnotic glow of the moon reflecting in his weary eyes. Somewhere in the depths, something waited, and Elias knew that soon he would have to face it before the moon devoured them all. But would his mind hold long enough to fight? Or would the shadows claim him first? The lake was watching, the moon was sinking, and the fracture was growing. Elias swallowed hard, the taste of salt and fear heavy on his tongue. The night was far from over. Mara knelt on the muddy shore, her fingers trembling as they hovered just above the water's trembling surface. The faint glow of the moon shimmered across the ripples, painting the lake in silver and shadow. Somewhere beneath that shifting light was Jonas, her brother, trapped in a place not meant for the living. She reached out, hesitant, as if the water might swallow her whole if she dared to touch it. But beneath the surface, the reflection wavered, and Jonas's face appeared, pale and blurred, like a candle flickering in a dark room. His eyes, wide and unblinking, locked with hers. He was there, yet unreachable, a ghost imprisoned by the moon's eerie embrace. "Jonas," Mara whispered, her voice barely more than a breath. "I'm here. I'll find a way to bring you back." Behind her, footsteps crunched on the gravel, and Elias's weathered figure emerged from the shadowed trees. His deep-set eyes, usually so guarded, shone with an intensity born of sleepless nights and haunted memories. "You saw him," Elias said quietly, not as a question but a confirmation. "I know," Mara nodded, wiping a tear from her cheek. "He's trapped in the reflection." Not just lost, trapped. They moved to the dock where the water stretched out like a black glass beneath the moon's fading light. The air was thick with cold and silence, broken only by the gentle lapping of waves against weathered wood. "It's more than just a reflection," Elias murmured, his voice low. "It's a doorway." Mara's gaze was fixed on the water. "A liminal space," she said, the words tasting strange but true. "Somewhere between here and whatever this place Jonas is trapped in." Elias reached down, skimming his fingers over the water's surface. The lake pulsed beneath his touch, alive in a way that defied reason. The moonlight fractured and twisted, shadows writhing like smoke caught in a sudden gust. Suddenly, the water rippled violently. Jonas's blurred form flickered like a flame on the edge of extinguishment. His mouth opened silently, mouthing words that Mara couldn't hear but felt deep in her bones, a warning, a plea. "We don't have much time," Elias said grimly. "The longer they're in there, the harder it is to pull them back." Mara swallowed hard. "What is this place? What is that thing?" Elias stared into the depths, the moon's glow casting a pale light across his weathered face. "It's the lunar entity. It's feeding off them, pulling them into its world, and it's growing stronger with every soul it consumes." The lake seemed to breathe around them, the boundary between water and sky blurring as the moon sank lower, its reflection stretching and distorting. The air was thick with a cold dread, the kind that settled into the bones and refused to leave. "We have to fight it," Mara said, gripping Elias's arm. "For Jonas, for everyone." Elias nodded, though the weight of the task ahead pressed heavily upon him. But how? As the moon's silver light waned, the lake's surface shimmered with a dark hunger, and the reflection's grip tightened. Somewhere beneath that shifting light, the line between reality and nightmare thinned, and the fight for Glimmerhollow's soul had only just begun. The night stretched on, filled with whispers, carried on the wind and the distant, haunting echo of a trapped voice beneath the waves. Mara and Elias stood side by side, their resolve hardening against the coming storm. The reflection's grip was tightening, but so was their determination. And in the heart of the lake's dark embrace, the first true battle against the lunar madness was about to begin. The surface of the lake rippled again, and in that moment, the moon seemed to pulse with a terrible life of its own, as if drawing them all deeper into its cold, unyielding embrace. The question lingered in the chill night air. Could they break the reflection's grip before it was too late? Or would Glimmerhollow be swallowed whole by the moon's insatiable hunger? And as the moon sank ever lower, the boundary between water and sky, sanity and madness, life and oblivion grew thinner still. Shadows danced erratically across the cracked wooden walls, mirroring the unease that had settled over Glimmerhollow like a suffocating fog. Sheriff Cultain stood rigid behind the battered oak desk, his broad shoulders squared as if bracing against a storm. While Elias, Marrow, and Mara Lorne faced him, their eyes alight with urgency. "Sheriff," Elias began, voice low but steady, "you can't dismiss what's happening. People are vanishing, drawn into that cursed reflection on the lake. I've seen it with my own eyes." Calton's face tightened, a deep crease forming between his brows. "Elias, I've been the sheriff here longer than you've been alive. I know when folks are spooked by the unknown, but fear doesn't make things disappear. There's got to be a logical explanation." Mara stepped forward, her voice cutting through the thick tension like a blade. "My brother's gone, Cultain, vanished into that shimmering surface. You want logic? Then explain that." The sheriff's gaze flicked to Mara, then back to Elias, his skepticism palpable. "Stories and legends won't save us. We need facts, not ghost tales." Elias clenched his fists, the memory of his lost wife and the drowning of his younger brother tightening his throat. "This isn't just stories. This is real. I've seen the ripples in the water distort like something alive beneath the surface. The moon's coming closer every night, and it's changing the lake, changing us." Calton's eyes narrowed. "You're talking lunacy, Elias. You're losing grip on what's real." The room's heavy silence was broken by a sudden commotion outside the hall. A villager burst through the door, breathless, eyes wide with terror. "I saw it, a man gone into the lake's reflection." Murmurs erupted, voices overlapping in panic and disbelief. Cultain raised his hands, trying to regain control. "Enough. We'll investigate this calmly. No more hysteria." But the damage was done. The villagers were splitting into factions. Those who believed the lake held a malevolent force, and those who clung desperately to reason. Outside, the moon hung lower than ever, its pale light casting a hypnotic glow across the restless waters. The lake seemed alive, breathing in sync with the rising dread that gripped the village. Elias and Mara exchanged a grim look. They knew the battle for Glimmerhollow's soul was only beginning, and with the sheriff's resistance, the path ahead would be fraught with suspicion, fear, and the creeping madness of the moon's descent. As the crowd dispersed, whispered warnings and fearful glances toward the lake became the night's soundtrack. The villagers were no longer united by awe, but divided by terror. The reflection on the water was no longer a beautiful spectacle, it was a doorway to oblivion. Ilias's gaze lingered on the moon's shimmering face, the weight of the unknown pressing down on him. Somewhere beneath that silver glow lay the answers, and the darkness waiting to consume them all. "We have to be ready," Mara whispered, gripping his arm. "This is far from over." He nodded, the chill of the night sinking deep into his bones. No one's safe anymore. Not from the lake. Not from the moon. And as the moon continued its slow, ominous descent, the boundary between reality and nightmare blurred irrevocably, pulling Glimmerhollow toward a fate it could neither escape nor fully understand. The tension between Elias, Mara, and Sheriff Kaltain was a powder keg on the verge of explosion. The sheriff's determination to cling to rationality was both a shield and a barrier, preventing the village from confronting the terrifying truth. Meanwhile, the growing divide among the villagers sowed distrust and fear, fracturing the community's fragile sense of security. Elias's frustration simmered beneath his calm exterior. Each skeptic's dismissal felt like a blow to the very hope he clung to. Mara's fierce resolve, however, was a beacon. Her knowledge of the village's hidden past and her personal loss fueling their quest. Their confrontation in the village hall was more than a clash of opinions. It was a battle for the soul of Glimmerhollow itself. And as the moon's reflection rippled ominously on the lake's surface, the true horror of what lay beneath was only beginning to reveal itself. The night stretched on, thick with unease and whispered fears. Somewhere in the darkness, the lunar entity watched and waited, its hunger growing with each passing moment. And the villagers, caught between disbelief and dread, faced a chilling question: how long before the moon ate the lake and everything within it? The answer hung in the cold night air, as heavy and unstoppable as the moon's slow, inexorable descent. The moon hung low, impossibly close, its pale light casting a sickly glow that shimmered on the lake's glassy surface. Elias gripped the oars, muscles taut, as the boat creaked and groaned beneath him. The village of Glimmerhollow had been cloaked in a strange, unsettling aura ever since the moon began its descent. But tonight, the weight of that dread pressed down harder than ever. He paused mid-stroke, eyes fixed on the luminous orb above, its reflection fracturing and twisting in the water beneath him. It was as if the lake itself breathed a living, pulsing entity harboring secrets darker than the night. Ilias's heart hammered in his chest, a primal drumbeat echoing the rising tide of fear. Yet, he had to know. The disappearances, the madness spreading like wildfire, he needed answers, no matter the cost. The boat drifted deeper into the lake's heart, the familiar shoreline vanishing into shadows. The air grew colder, sharper, as if the night itself was holding its breath. Ilias's breath came shallow, misting in the chill. Beneath him, the water pulsed with an unnatural rhythm, ripples spreading in silent waves that seemed to defy the wind. Suddenly, a flicker beneath the surface caught his eye. Shapes moved, fluid and elusive like shadows cast by a flame. Elias leaned forward, peering into the depths. Faces emerged, pale and distorted, their eyes hollow yet burning with a desperate intensity. They twisted and writhed in the watery darkness, mouths opening and closing soundlessly, sending shivers crawling down his spine. A whisper brushed his ear, so faint he thought it might be the wind. "Elias." The voice was fragile, desperate, a thread pulling at his sanity. He spun around, heart racing, but the lake was empty save for the moon's ghostly reflection. His grip tightened on the oars as the ripples around the boat began to pulse, glowing faintly with an eerie light. The lunar entity was here no longer just a shadowy rumor, but a tangible presence, alive in the water and sky. Its form shifted like liquid silver, casting flickering shapes that danced between nightmare and reality. Elias felt the weight of its gaze, cold and infinite, probing the depths of his mind, stirring the darkest memories he had tried to bury. Memories of Los's wife, his brother, Jonas flooded him, mingling with the moon's hypnotic pull. The boundary between self and shadow blurred as the entity's influence seeped into his thoughts. Yet amidst the terror, a steely resolve ignited within him. He would not let this malevolent force consume his village, nor his soul. With a sudden, determined thrust, Elias seized the oars and began to row back toward the shore. The lake fought back, waves rising in unnatural swells that rocked the boat and threatened to swallow him whole. But he pressed on, the flickering light of the moon's reflection chasing him like a predator. As the shoreline re-emerged through the mist, Elias cast one last glance over his shoulder. The lunar entity's form lingered beneath the water, a monstrous reflection of the moon's descent, promising that the battle was only just beginning. The night had revealed its horrors, but also the path forward. Elias knew the lake held more secrets than ever before, and the moon's eerie glow was a beacon guiding him into deeper darkness. The question that haunted him now was not whether he could face the entity, but whether he could survive the cost of doing so. The night swallowed the boat's wake, leaving only silence and the fading shimmer of the moon's reflection. The moon's descent was no longer a distant mystery, but a living nightmare woven into the fabric of Glimmer Hollow. Elias's solitary journey onto the lake had unveiled a terrifying truth: that the lunar entity was more than a curse, was a ravenous force hungry for souls. And it had marked him as its next adversary. The chill of the night lingered, a cold reminder that the lake's depths were far darker than anyone dared imagine. Yet somewhere beneath the dread, a fragile flame of hope flickered. Elias would return. He would fight for the village, for Mara's brother trapped beyond the reflection, for the fragile boundary between sanity and oblivion. But as the moon sank ever lower, the sky itself seemed to fade, and the lake waited patiently to claim its due.